Hey, everybody, welcome back to View from the Top podcast, where we help growth-minded Christian businessmen who desire momentum in their business, their family, and their finance get through the valleys and up the mountain to their very own View from the Top. Hey, I am glad you're back listening with us today. Today, we've got a pretty cool episode. We've got a couple other guests or co-hosts with us. You've met them before, so we'll introduce them in just a moment, and then Big A is going to join us as well. Hey, we're going to jump into a topic today called From the Boardroom to the Playroom. So, man, any of you guys out there listening that struggle with how to, maybe balance isn't even the right word. We're probably going to talk about that today, but how do you handle the work-child relationship? Whether you go here, do this, how much effort, how much not effort, like what is, we all struggle with that. We hear it so many times. We're going to tackle it today with Big A and myself on one end of the spectrum, having kids out of the house and haven't gone through that. And then we've got two other guys, we'll introduce them here in just a moment, that are right in the middle of it. So we're glad that they're in with us today. So let's get everybody in here. So we've got Big A going to join us in the studio. We've got Anthony Witt back with us, and we've got Brett Barnhart with us as well. Welcome, guys, back to From the Top.
Glad to be here.
Excited to be in.
Man, good to see you guys. I looked at a picture just a few days ago, and it had three of us in the picture from 11 years ago. That was pretty cool. I was like, God, where did time go? Like, wow. This wasn't even going to be a thing, and now it's like a real thing. And three of you guys have been around for that duration. And Wally, I'm sorry, you wasn't in the picture, Wally. I'm sorry, man. But you wasn't in the picture.
Like
I wish
8 years isn't a long time anymore.
8 years is a long time, but yeah. Yeah, I think it was 11 years we were at Social Media Marketing World, and having a dinner is cool. Yeah. It was really cool. I'm really excited to have you guys, though, man. This is going to be a fun topic from boardroom to playroom. We're going to talk here just in a few minutes. But Wally, catch us up, man.
Yeah,
what's been going on?
A little different. Normally we have you guys on the Forge, and but today we're going to dive into a topic because we value where you guys are at and your opinions, and obviously we know where you're coming from, and you got a lot to share. So looking forward to that. And then Big A is going to introduce a topic here in a second. But before we do, I have a really, you might think it's a silly question, but I think we all deal with it. So the question is, do you talk with other strangers in a public restroom?
In a public restroom?
Yep.
Strangers.
There's only one stranger that I talk to in a public restroom. But I think it's weird. So, but do you ever guys ever feel awkward? You walk in, everybody's kind of standing there. Nobody says anything. Eye contact doesn't happen.
No.
Like, I mean, not that it's a place for social activity, but like, so I'll go first. So for me, I walk in, and if somebody like gets my eye attention, then I'll be like, hey, how's it going? Right. But beyond that, like that's it. I'm not looking across or anything. And then but if there's a guy in there that's cleaning the restroom, he's the only stranger that I'll actually like talk to. I'll be like, hey man, thank you so much for like taking care of this place, because you make it look a lot better when you're around. How about you guys? You guys like, are you social butterflies in the public restroom? Are you like total silent, or like what's the deal?
Total silence.
Yeah.
How do you even?
I'm with you.
What's the
I'm with you,
icebreaker? Like, how's your day?
Yeah.
What's going on?
What are you going to say?
Yeah.
Hey, I was in a public restroom about a month ago, and the guy was on his phone at the urinal. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Like, this guy's carrying on a full-fledged business conversation, 10 guys lined up down the wall, and he's carrying on like he's at his desk.
No earbuds, right? He's like holding the phone.
No, he's on the phone.
On speakerphone.
On speakerphone. I seen it on speakerphone.
He is absolutely standing there, and everybody's hearing the whole conversation. All these knucklehead guys lined up at the urinal, and I'm like, what are you doing?
It's the urinal mastermind.
Yeah, the urinal mastermind. I guess it was. Yeah, it's like, well, first of all, it's like, doesn't he even care that there's a microphone on there? This guy could hear everybody. And I'm like, what are you?
Goosh. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's like, no. Wally, no, there's no way I'm talking to anybody. I don't even know if I'm going to talk to the janitor in there or not, the guy cleaning it. Maybe.
I like to make him feel special, because
I've given him money before. I've given him like $20 and said, hey, man, thanks, and go buy your lunch or something. But
I have to say, though, it's probably most awkward at church.
Really?
Because you know half the people in there.
Interesting.
And you don't know whether to look at them or say anything or not,
right?
Like, yeah.
Like,
hey, how's things going?
Yeah.
What's up? How you been?
And you don't like, you don't want to be rude, but then again, it's like, no, you just don't do
This
that.
isn't the place.
No, they can get over it if they get mad.
Yeah. Or the guy coming out is going to shake your hand as you're walking in. It's like, no, I'm good.
It's just water. I did it to dry them off.
I just washed my hands. I'm good.
All right. Thank you guys for answering the question.
So we got 3 no's and 1 that will talk to the custodian. So other than that, don't expect any of the 3 of us to say hello to you in the bathroom. Listen, I want to talk to you about something that's really been a topic on my mind for maybe a decade, maybe longer. I've thought about it, but I've been really dealing with it for about a decade. And we've titled it Boardroom to Playroom. And what I'm referring to there is the amount of time that we work versus the amount of time that we're with our kids. And, my children obviously are grown and married and got kids, and, I got grandkids, and I still kind of deal with it though, right? Brooke's 40, Holly's 38, and I'm still dealing with this thing. Like, I want to be there for my kids. And at the same time, I want to be there, for my office, the team, and I want to make a living. And it's like this constant challenge. And I'll never forget a couple of decades ago, I came home and Robin came up to me real solemn, and she put her hands on my shoulders and she looked at me and she said, and when she said, I knew I was in trouble because there was a second coming. But she put her hands on my shoulders and she said, I want to thank you for all that you do for our family. Like, we get to live an amazing life. Like, we have a beautiful home. We had a vacation home at the time. And she said, we have nice cars and beautiful, furniture, and I don't have to work. And I just want you to know how appreciative I am. But I feel like a single mom.
Wow.
And when she said that, it just ripped my heart out. It was like, I first got defensive. I was like, well, you wouldn't have all these things and wouldn't get to stay at home if I wasn't working. And she said, I realize the difficulty, but I don't want to live a life by myself. And I want you here to go to Brooke and Holly's cheerleading practice and ball games and just be at home for dinner. And I was like, now I've got a quandary. Like, now my awareness has been heightened. What am I going to do? And so I had to really work through that. And it was a struggle because I'm very driven. And I know you guys are very driven as well. You got a bunch of kids, several of you do. And there's this challenge. And I thought it would be really helpful if we would get on and just tell our personal experiences and even find out if that's been a challenge for you and some of the things that you've done that's allowed you to overcome some of those obstacles. Is it still a challenge today? If so, what are you doing about that? And I just thought I'd open the discussion up. So yeah, if you feel good about the topic, jump in and give me your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I'll jump in. So for me, the same thing, constant struggle still today. Luckily, Crystal and I had kids later on. I had been in business about 10 years before we had kids. So that helped. I can't imagine trying to start a business today with all that I had to put into the business then and still have a family life. I think it really comes down to, it's a choice. It's been a choice for me, and I either have to choose growth and huge or family, if you will, because I can't do both. If I say yes to that, I'm going to say no to this. So I don't know. There's a lifestyle that I said I want to live in my life, and to some extent, I got to be okay, even as a business owner wanting to grow things, that this may just have to hold back for a while. I've told Crystal that too. Like, I went, I looked the other day in Parent Queue. I think I got 350 weeks left with Cole. I'm like 60% through the time that I have with him.
Wow.
And you said what, Brett? What was that you said?
It's called Parent Queue.
Parent Queue.
And it gives you tips on their age, and then it counts down the weeks that you have left with each child. It's pretty depressing when you open it up. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's a good reminder. So yeah, it's like I can build something huge if I want to after they're gone. I don't know if I would. I'm not saying I would, but I want to be there now as much as I can. But
can we break that down a little further? Because I've been around for your journey ever since your children were born. And so I've watched you mature and grow. Mm-hmm. I don't know that I totally agree that you can't do both, but it's how you do both. And you've got a pretty good sized organization now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a lot of people in comparison would look at what you're doing and say, there's no way I could grow that size. And you have 20 or 30 employees and you run a pretty good size company. And so in comparison to some other people, it's a small organization. In comparison to others, it's large. And so how did you decide? Like, how did you decide this is the place for you in this organization, this size, where you feel good about the time that you're in the playroom, not the boardroom?
Well, that goes back to, are you willing to give up profits to hire people to bring them into the organization to do those things so that you can have that time? But nobody wants to give that up either because they want to make all the money in the world. They want to do both, right?
That's hard.
And you know what's going to get cut first. So then...
Especially as soon as you have it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I still remember I sold the jobs, I worked on the jobs, and I bid the jobs. So then I would bid till 10 o'clock at night. And I remember when we were hiring our first estimator, and I figured it up, and we needed to make another $1 million a year to maintain overhead and cost to stay competitive. So then I got held accountable to hire that person. And then within a year needed to make $1 million. Well, we didn't do it. It took about 1.5 years. But then that gave me that freedom to be able to do those things, to go to doctor's appointments, to take the kids to school, to be there in the morning with them, have breakfast with them, and do those things with them, and then go out through the day. So it was even hard in the marriage, going back to what Robin said, because at first it was hard for Crystal because even you bring two different people into a marriage, and she grew up and her parents are older, so her dad was home every night at 4:30. I grew up in a family where you got home and you went out and worked on stuff outside, and you didn't always eat together as a family. So it even created a whole new dynamic in the marriage, which then turned into the kids because how she grew up versus how I grew up. So I think going back to what you said about Robin, she respects that now and she understands that. But I think it's still hard for her sometimes because, I don't know, I go home, be honest with you guys, I want to go home and just like read stuff on my phone and check out. Like just check out because I'm totally exhausted from the day. And that's just a way of just disconnecting and checking out from everything. And I can't do that. So it's like, how many times do our families get the worst of us and our business or what we do every day gets the best of us? And that's usually how it goes. So,
Anthony, how about you? What's kind of been your journey?
I think my journey's quite a bit different than your guys'. I come from a big family, and I have a big family, and so there's
what's a big family?
7. So like 7. I'm one of 7, or I was one of 6. They adopted one right after I graduated. So, so one of 7. And so you can't physically go to your kids' events. Like that's not possible because you have one kid in cheerleading, one in volleyball, one in football, one in cross country, one in track. Which kid are you going to pick? And when are you going to feel guilty? And so we have that same dynamic now, even because we have 7. And so so we don't build our lives. I didn't grow up in a family that built their lives on going to the kids' events, and nor do we build our lives on going to our kids' events. Now, that also means that my kids don't do travel sports. Honestly, I think travel sports have ruined so many things. It's ruined sport, actually, in a lot of ways, but it's also ruined family. It's ruined some community programming. Anyway, it's another one of my little... I think it's one of my little things that bothers me. But
I'm going to have some guys back for that topic. Yeah.
But travel.
I get some of these high D dads. I listen to this podcast.
That's right. But it's not physically possible, right? And so it's not about attending their event. It's about building a relationship with them. So tonight I was supposed to have a client. I'll use myself as an example now. Tonight I was supposed to have a client. One of my daughters has a volleyball game. I wasn't going to be able to make it. Wasn't planning on making it. She knew I wasn't going to make it. Well, if I can make it, great. I'll go. And so I'm planning on going because my client moved to a different night. No big deal. But if I didn't make that volleyball game, that's not going to change my relationship with her, because my relationship is not built by sitting in the stands. My relationship is built by building a relationship with her. And so it's doing the things. And so that's what I grew up in. And so that's what we've done more of, which is it's more about growing in intimate relationships with them. And the other thing, I actually kind of took a little bit of notes or wrote down you told us the topic a little bit ahead of time, not much, but a little bit. So I wrote down a couple of notes, and one of them was personality. I've got kids that, like my son wants me to show up to his game. That's what he wants. So I show up to more of my son's games than I do to the daughter that I talked about tonight. And she's fine. And he's fine if I show up to his games and I don't show up to her games, because that's his personality, right? So I build a relationship partially the way they want it. And then secondly, I build relationships by actually building a relationship with them. It's what's the statistic? I think the statistic is something along the, and I can find it, but Pastor was talking about it a while back, that families that have dinner around the table 2 to 3 times a night, their kid is like 80% likely to stay in the church as they age out. Some crazy high number, right? We do dinner at our family as much as possible, which honestly is probably maybe 4 nights a week with the whole family, maybe 5, but that's a crazy high number.
Anthony, let me
families.
throw you a curve in there. What if you got 3 sons and they all 3 want you at their ball games, and you've got a client opportunity to make some pretty good money? That's what our audience is confronted with today, that's listening right now. What are you going to do? How are you going to nurture those relationships? How are you going to be present? How do you got 7 kids. You need to make a lot of money to feed those kids. You got a lot of expenses ahead of you, by the way, just so you know, you got 7 kids. But you need to be working a lot to provide for them, right? So how are you balancing that? Let's just hypothetically say you got 3 kids that want you to be at their game.
Well, you can't. First off, if I live in the angst that I'm going to be able to make it to all 3 games at 3 different locations, I'm creating my own psychological discomfort that I can't fix. It's something that can't be fixed. I can't be in 3 locations at the same time. So first off, I start there. Or maybe I don't start there, but that is one of the things I start on. Like, I can't live in the discomfort that I can't change that. So then I work on the relationship with the kids individually, which might mean I think games is maybe a bad example. We're probably getting too much of the weeds in games, because that's not really your question, but I might go to your game this weekend, his game next weekend, the next game, right? The next week. Yeah. It's about spending, I'm going to make sure that I make up that time with that kid. I'm going to make up that time. That's not even possible. I'm going to make sure that I have dedicated time with that child, because that's what that child needs, if that makes sense. But that wasn't your question. You asked about, your question was, if there's 3 games and there's a client, what do I do?
Yeah.
Right.
Now you got to choose. You're going to work, make a little extra money, or are you going to go home?
I think there's also, I call it a pendulum, or I call it swings, right? I think there's hyper-focused times that happen. So that's what we've done in our family, is there's times where there's hyper-focused periods. And sometimes those periods last a week. Sometimes they last a month. Sometimes they're maybe even a little bit longer. If I can honestly say, I don't know if they've been longer than that, but there's times where I've got to work a lot, and I'm not going to be around, and I am going to miss the games, and I am going to miss the things, because I'm going to be hyper-focused on those periods of time so that I can swing back to the other side, the pendulum to the other side, so to speak. If there are only 2 dynamics is work and family, then I'm going to swing it back to the other side. Of course, there's a ton of other components to that, right? There's not just 2 things. There's more than 2 things. But realizing that the business life, it's kind of like inside your business. Sometimes I got to be hyper-focused on sales. Sometimes I got to be hyper-focused on operations. Sometimes I got to be hyper-focused on finance. Well, I'm not hyper-focused on all of them at the same time, because then I'm not focused on any of them. And so I've learned that and I've actually learned, I've actually learned it. I think, I don't remember who taught it to me, but I started realizing, wait, I just need to stop and focus hard on this thing. So to do the same thing with the family, but the same thing with the work, which is be more focused on this topic right now, or I'm going to be hyper-focused, which means I am going to miss things. But just live in the guilt of the fact that I miss these things, that's not helpful, because then there's the discontinuity. What I see there, the discontinuity is if you're living in guilt, part of it is probably that you're living in guilt because you don't think what you're doing is right. And if that's a problem, you need to figure that out as an individual. And there's a lot of components of that. It's not just say, figure it out and do it. There's multiple pieces of that. But if you keep living in guilt, I'll give you a reverse example. So I'm trying to build systems to myself. And one of the guys in my mastermind group, he's keeping me accountable, and I keep him accountable. And I wasn't doing some of the systems. Like for me, it was working out and getting up, and there was like a series of things, right? My morning routine, so to speak. And we sat down, we were talking about it. And what he said, okay, this is why you're missing it. This is why you're missing those routines right now. He's like, give yourself grace to miss those routines, to live into the family for a minute. Because I was feeling guilty that I wasn't doing enough work in part of my systems for my business. He said, well, wait a minute. You're in a phase right now. Right now, I was in a phase at that point. So you're in a phase where it's okay. You don't need to work out at 5 o'clock in the morning every morning. Like you don't need to do that right now. Yeah, you need to be healthy. You need to work out. But he's like, let's move that to a different time of the day. Let's move it to fewer times of the week. Because of where we were getting up, I was getting up like a ton with kids in the middle of the night, not getting any sleep. And I was having guilt that I wasn't doing my business system stuff. Like because for me, if my day doesn't start correctly, if you will, my business work doesn't start correctly or doesn't start early enough, so I'm not in the business. For me, it's early. It's not necessarily late, it's early. And so it was the reverse, which is you swing sometimes in life. And that's the part that I think a lot of people don't give themselves grace. And I like the word grace here. They don't give themselves grace in those periods. They think, well, I didn't do it, whatever it is. I didn't do the business thing. I didn't do the kid thing. And they don't give themselves grace. And so then they live in this dichotomy of, shoot, I'm failing at everything, or I don't know what to do. And I'll be quiet.
So at what point, I've thought about this in regards to all this, is at what point is it also our role to instill in them that you have to go and work every day? Say I've built my business. I can sit at home 4 hours a day, half a day, work 2 to 3 days a week, and then they go and you're not going to support them and they got to go get a job. And all they know is how they grew up and that they only worked 3 days a week. So then they want to live that life and they can't do it because you see what I'm saying? Like I think there's a healthy balance around it to say, my dad worked 6-7 days a week, and I don't have any wounds from him working that much because he made the best of it and he took me with him. And I got to be a part of that, right? So then when I went in to start my business and I had to work 14-hour days, that's all I knew. So it wasn't hard for me because that's what we did. But I would have to think back, and if my dad worked 40 hours a week and come home and did nothing, then would I have the courage and strength and grit and determination to push through building a business if what I knew was how my dad worked every day?
My story, backstory with my wife, Sonia, kind of aligns like that. So her dad owned a business, and he's a painter. But his mindset was pretty much like he earned enough to make it, right? Like that was it. Like just to barely pay the bills, make it. And then he would take off, a couple of months for hunting season, and they ever and like barely had enough, but they had enough. Now I'm not going to dive into like their family life and all that. It's for a whole different day. It's not, and I'm just going to say like it not, I'm just going to say it like he didn't really utilize the other time for building relationships either. So that had a lot to do with it. But so what Sonia brought into our relationship when we got married was very quickly, I was going to become an entrepreneur. I tried entrepreneurial things. And what was her definition of what an entrepreneur did, right? Like he worked just enough. And that wasn't me. Like I was all about like, I'm the last two companies I worked for before I went out on my own, like I was working 80 hours a week because I was going to accomplish stuff and do big things. And it wasn't even about getting a name for myself. But then I quickly realized after they made bad decisions and went under, like I can do that for myself and fail just as well.
Right.
So let's try that next.
Right.
But that wasn't normal for Sonia. And then I had to do a little bit of traveling, and she's like, hey, I didn't get married to sleep alone. And then we started having kids, and what I did, I'm not saying this was right or wrong. I look back and go, man, I wish I would have done this different. I kind of got caught up in why do we talk so much about this as like that we bring the games into it? The kids' school activities. I don't know why we do that all the time, but we do. So that was a thing for me too. It was like, hey, we're going to be at everything. And so because I had my own business, I had employees, but I worked remotely. Everybody worked remotely. And so I was able to flex my schedule, which seemed awesome. And I made it to all my kids' stuff. All my daughters had 3 girls. So I made it to all their stuff. And looking back, I think we did a pretty good job with leveraging some of that time together. Riding home and riding there, and they weren't sitting in the phone with their backseat with their headphones on their phones, or that kind of, like, we had conversations, we built relationships around those things. But then because I left at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the afternoon to go get to the game, and then I'd get home after we had dinner and be home at 6 or 7 o'clock. I'd go back to work till midnight. So I missed a lot of like them being at home time when I'm in the office from 7 till 10 o'clock when they went to bed. Like, I look back and go, I missed that.
What would you do different today, knowing what you know today?
I would not do,
different?
I don't know why I had that in my head. It was a feather and for some reason it was like this feather in the cap that was a status thing. I think, like, man, if I made it to every game and somehow like I was an amazing dad, and not that I wasn't, but I could look back and go, I would sacrifice some of those things that they did, that I went to, especially some of the away games. They went to a private Christian school, so sometimes you had to drive 2 hours to get to a game, and then the game, and then drive 2 hours back. So it was like a whole ordeal. And you spent a lot of time on the road. And then while you're driving, right, people calling you because they're trying to do business and you're trying to do a family thing. And so that gets in the way. You're not really here. You're on the phone. You guys have heard that before, I'm sure, right? So I would, if I could go back, I would definitely be more, because what I know now, right, more clear in my communication around what's important. And I would balance those things out better. And I wouldn't put some status on getting to every game. I would put the status on what I've seen Brett and Anthony do, which are developing the relationships with my kids. And sometimes that's a game, and sometimes that's daddy-daughter date night. Sometimes that's just sitting and having a conversation in a different way, or going on a walk, or whatever it is, right? So, like, I would definitely balance that out more if I could go back and do that again.
Wally, would it have been easier if you'd had a clear written vision and knew what you wanted when your children were young?
I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I didn't have masterminds, and like, I had no idea. No one was asking me questions or challenging me.
It would have been easier. That's my question.
Oh.
It would have been easier had you known.
I still would have had to make the decisions, right? That may have been
but you would
hard.
have at least known what you wanted.
Oh, heck yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I did have vision.
That's where I see people
but it was
now.
like, do a lot of work, make a lot of money.
That was your vision. Right. Much differently than you have today.
Yeah, and I say that, and I want to preface this because it drives me crazy when old guys like me now get on podcasts and say things like, well, I wouldn't have worked as hard. It's like, well, baloney, man, because you made a ton of money, dude. And like, you say that now, but you wouldn't say that before. So I preface it with this. I do think you can do, when I say both, responsibly. If you do both responsibly, like Brett was saying, right? Like, if you work responsibly with what God's called you to do, and you raise your family and meet the needs of your wife in a way that God's called you to do, God's going to help you figure that out. Like that's like, he's going to provide the increase where he desires that increase, not necessarily what I think that should be in a given period of time. But I think it's a both and. I don't think it's either or.
Anthony, I want to go back to something you said a while ago that I'm just going to admit it. I live in it. My parents or grandparents never came to a single game I ever played.
So you are that boy.
Ever.
Like, I know enough
My mom's
about
90.
you.
I still,
I
am. Yeah. And I feel like I need to be there. Right.
Yeah. But like, if like what I know about you,
I feel it.
what I know about you from your childhood, even like you're the kid that needed somebody to show up. Because what does Big A need? I mean, this is a little self-disclosure or whatever.
Right.
You need an attaboy. Like that's one of the ways, right? Okay, that's fine. Let's know that. Let's note that, and let's do it. Like, yeah, I can, and that's a deep one for you.
How do we take that as parents and grandparents now to the audience that's listening? How can they reevaluate what they're caught up in today doing? And some of it is out of guilt. Like, I don't know that I've missed a handful of any of my grandchildren's sporting activities or birthdays or anything. And I don't want to, because I look back and think I wanted somebody to be at my game. I wanted somebody to say, man, that was a great hit. That was a great spike, whatever it is that you're doing.
You should ask.
And there's a sense of guilt, like, man, I really need to be here. Right. But I really need to go to the game. And there's this dichotomy I live in, like, which one do I choose? And it's one of the reasons I wanted to do this episode, is to free some people from that sense of guilt.
Maybe it should have been the Big A Forge.
Yeah.
There you go.
I was going to say,
I'm not even masked.
Blur him out real quick.
Yeah. You might ask the grandkids, or have somebody ask the grandkids, what's your favorite memory with Big A? Like, what is it? I'm going to put money on it's not at one of their games. No, it might be one or two.
That's good.
Right. It might be, you know what, when I hit that home run, he gave me a high five and we went out for ice cream, and that's what they remember. Okay. So that was it. And maybe that's that kid's personality and that kid's tendency. But I'm going to guess it's when we were sitting on the back porch swinging and we were talking about this, or knowing a little bit more about you. It's, you know what? It's when we were just fishing, just the two of us. But that's probably what it's going to be, is my guess.
You're shooting balloons out of the sky.
Yeah. And that might
shooting balloons out of the sky. I think they loved that. That was fun. I never thought about going to ask them what you just said, right? Even at my age now, with as many kids and grandkids, it's like going to them and enlisting from them, what is it that's meaningful to you? So the audience that's listening to that, you may not have to live in a sense of guilt their whole life. Go ask them. Great tip today, Anthony.
It's funny you said that, Anthony. I was laying in bed with Cole last night, putting him to bed, and I just asked him, like, and randomly I'll do this, like, what do they love about me, and what do they wish I would do more, and what do they dislike about me? And sometimes you get told stuff that you don't like, or you don't want to hear.
Come on. What did he say?
What did he say?
Well,
I want to know too.
he told me the things that he loves, and I play with him and spend time with him. And I said, well, what do you dislike? And he just sat there for a few minutes. He didn't know what to say. And I said, okay, that's good enough. That's good enough. And he just started
you
laughing.
don't need to finish. Yeah.
And honestly, that's where it ended. So I probably need to reconvene that, because we started talking about something else. And he said, I really don't have anything, Dad.
You gave him an opportunity though, Brett. Like, dude, seriously. Yeah, that'll come again, right? He'll be more prepared next time. That's
well,
awesome.
if he thinks about it. So, I mean, there's been times, one time I asked him, and he told me that he appreciated that I respected the Bible and I swatted him, because that's what the Bible told me to do. Like,
he liked Mr. Sting?
Yeah,
like he brought up Mr. Sting?
Yeah. And then sometimes it will be, take me to do this, or spend time with me, or Addie may say, let's go on a date night. You haven't taken me on a date night in a while. So then trying to get that on the calendar. So, and then going back to what Big A said, this fall we did a family vision together. And one of our core values in our family is being an intentionally connected family. And then we went back and tied Bible verses to it. So it kind of helps ground you. It doesn't, I think Scott Beebe said this, but like your core values are your speed limit signs. Doesn't mean you have to go that speed. But if you break that speed, you may get caught. So you know that speed is the speed that you need to be running. And sometimes you got to go faster to get around somebody, but then sometimes like you need to maintain that speed, or eventually it's going to catch up with you. So that just kind of helps us, and then to go back and revisit that, and to live by those core values as a family. So,
Brett, dive into that a little further. Talk about the two children and some of their vision and the things that they're trying to accomplish. It's really out of the ordinary that you've taken it to the level that you have. Most adults will do the vision casting.
yeah.
Don't really include the kids. I love how y'all have done that. Talk about it a little bit further.
Well, going into this, I was working on some company stuff and I needed to write company vision. And I realized that I've always wrote company, and then my family ended up living out of whatever the company decided. So I said, I'm going to write my family first and then do the company. Well, then I need, I could just write it myself, but let's just involve the family. So we'd sat down a couple nights and projected the screen up on the TV and just wrote vision. And it was hard for Addie, she's 9, to stay focused, but Cole really got into it. Like he hooked up his MacBook and was going to town typing. And we set a yearly and then we broke it down quarterly, and they have some quarter goals. And actually it's sitting on our countertop to review what we were supposed to do this quarter and rewrite our quarterly goals. And then we talked about vacation. We talked about travel. We talked about what are we going to do together? Like, what do you want to do with mom? What do you want to do with dad? And just started laying all those things out as a family and then trying to live that out. Obviously you don't hit it perfect, but I didn't have that. We never talked about that. We just did whatever, kind of lived the life that my family lived. So obviously you can't do everything, because some of the stuff they're like, no, we can't do that. That's great. But anyways, so it's been good. And then to revisit that, honestly, this is our first quarter. So just staying focused on it moving forward as a family.
Is Crystal in alignment with that? Your wife?
She loves it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know there's some, I remember it was probably like 4 or 5 years ago. Sonia, my wife, she wouldn't have been like, that's a corporate business thing. I'm not creating no stinking vision. And now it's different. Now she's like, yeah, like that's important. I get that why.
Yeah.
So obviously some people are like, I think a lot of it though is the approach. I think if you treat it like a business, that's going to come across like a business. But I think you can do that in a way with your family, even if your wife is hesitant.
Yeah, we just took each person. We said, what's our family? And then break it down to each person to say, what's your personal, spiritual, right?
Yeah,
financially, like even the kids, like Addie wanted to make money. I can't remember what she wanted to buy. So setting in our vision, I said, if you detail my truck every week, I'll pay you $3. Well, then we could calculate those numbers. She hasn't done it. So when we revisit that vision and she's like,
child labor law should come into play here.
I paid FICA, FUTA, and SUTA on it. It's on the payroll.
$3. I'm going to tell Addie to turn you in.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyways, yeah, go ahead.
We tried something new this year, and I started the question I asked, I think, Kevin, you asked where I said, where do you want to be at the end of the year? So I sat the whole family down around the table, all of them, the 2 youngest, it's pointless because they're 2 and 4, but all the other ones, we all sat around the table and we were just talking like, where do you want to be? And that gave me the doorway. And so they all have their own comes you'll be, essentially. And it's really simple because it's just, where do you want to be in these 5 areas, right? That's what is. Like even and I'd have to pull it up to tell you what it is, but like even the 9-year-old, she's got a career, something in career. She has something there. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, but like they've got something in every area. It's just one thing. Some of them have maybe 2 in each area. But
veterinarian.
Yeah. But it was what we've done with it. It's really helped us to be able to, and we haven't done I literally just thought about it here. We haven't scheduled our Q2. We should have done our Q2 meeting already. We need to do it as a family. But it's been really helpful to just say, well, where did you want to be? Where do you want to go? And it helps individually give them direction, if that makes sense. It was super helpful to start with, where do you want to be at the end of the year? And they would say something. I say, well, what about in spiritual? Where do you want to be? My whole goal on the kid side is mostly spiritual. Like, where do you want to be spiritual? But I can't just sit on that. So I sit on all the other ones at the same time. Where do you want to be financially? Where do you want to be with your relationships? So some of them have goals to like have bonfires at the house with their friends or whatever it might be. But they've all got,
that's awesome.
One thing in each area.
Anthony, what are some of the boundaries that you've put in place, you and Sarah, related to the kids, that they're no fails? Like we're doing these things and I'm not going to allow work for the most part, to get in the way.
So I've got two things working I think they're working in my favor that maybe some of the guys listening, or maybe even some of you guys don't have. The one thing I have in my favor is, so I ran a public works department. I ran the whole city basically. And I was doing, like you talk 80-hour weeks. My average was an 80 to 100-hour week every week of the year for 5 years. And then I got paid for it. I got paid really well for it. And I literally got to the point where I can picture it like it was yesterday, where I came home after like 100 hours straight. And it's not 100 hours straight, right? I took an hour nap twice in the middle of the night, plowing snow, fixing main breaks, all this crazy stuff, right? And I said, I don't want this life. I like my family. And I literally told her, I said, I was almost done with my first master's at this point. I said, I just want you to know that I'm going to apply at McDonald's tomorrow. And I'm not even joking. Nothing against McDonald's workers, but I was like, I'm done because I like my family. And so I got hit that burnout period where I'm done with this. So I've got that going for me. The other thing I've got going for me is that the guys that are doing the 80-hour weeks, they're the guys that are sitting on my couch. And so I see how they mess up a lot. I'm like, shoot, I don't want to do that. I better change that thing. So for me, I think your question was, what are your no fails? Is that what your question was?
For those that don't know, Anthony's a counselor, right? So licensed therapist. And so, yeah.
What was your original question?
Yeah, that's good. You got them right in front of you. It's like, don't do this. Yeah, I was just saying, what are your boundaries? What are your no fails?
Yeah, so what I've learned
to protect my family. What
I've learned is the swings and to identify the swings. So I'll sit down with Sarah and I'll say, hey, I think this is what this looks like for the next week. We're going into this, and we've both learned we got to buckle down on this. Maybe we have to sit down the whole family. Right? My oldest is 17, almost 18. My youngest is 2. I've got kids all in the middle. And so sometimes we got to sit down with the family and say, hey, we're going to need to do this type of work, and we're going to do hard. That's the swing. But I don't have a problem. One of the things that I've worked really hard at is the whole phone thing. Actually, Brett, I got it from you a long time ago. You're like, leave my phone in the car. I don't know if you're still doing that or not. I don't leave my phone in the car, but my phone goes on the charger. And the whole family's phones go on the charger. My kids turn in their phones, I think it's 7:30. And I got older kids, but and our 18-year-old, she's almost 18. She's getting to the point where she's going to make some of her own decisions. I'm trying to train them that we want to have relationships. So that's a huge one. I also carry 2 phones. You might say, well, why do you carry 2 phones? Why don't you just put it all on one phone? Why do you need 2 phones? You can even have 2 lines on one phone. Yeah, well, I can take the work phone, and I can take the work phone and I can set it down and I can leave it all weekend long. I leave my work phone. Text me. Go ahead. You guys have all done it probably. Text me on Friday night on my work phone. I might text you back on Monday morning. I will text you back on Monday morning because that's what I do, my Monday morning text with my work clients. But I've made that separation. That's been huge.
Right.
When I did that, and I only did that 3 years ago, where I got a separate phone and I made the switch where I can literally put that thing down. And a lot of people, they don't have that.
That's hard. I don't disagree with you, but I like talking to people. It's fun. I like work. It's fun.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, it's not
a burden.
It's not at all.
Yeah. You like it.
Yeah. I enjoy it. So
I'd rather skip most social activities and work, honestly. That's my tendency, right?
Yeah. What is it? The social activities
so
with
that's
your family?
Where it gets hard.
Or the social activities outside of your house.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you and the kids are at the pool with your wife,
my parents were here this weekend. I was like, "How can
I work?" Right. Wally, what about you? When your girls were little, were there any no fails? You were going to do these things.
Yeah. So I think it was around the idea of communication. If there's one thing that I'll say that God, Holy Spirit, whatever you want to say, impressed upon me when we first having children. And I don't know if it'd be different with sons or daughters. I don't know any of that. I just know I had daughters, and that's what God gave me. And so that's the journey that I've been on. And it's really around the idea of communication, like being vulnerable and transparent with them and just about most everything. And I think because of that, when I say, I'm talking about like age appropriate, but around finances, around relationships, around struggles in our home, not, again, totally applicable to age. Okay.
Sure.
The girls, it was so funny. They got to this point when they were like probably five. Jenna must have been 5. Ashley was probably 10, where they did this on their own. It was the weirdest thing. When they were in trouble, when they know they were going to get in trouble, and mom and dad said, hey, after dinner, you get your thing done. Can you come meet us in the living room? And we want to talk through something that happened today. They would bring their sisters with them.
They would bring advocates.
They would bring
right?
them. And you know what the cool, like the total unintended benefit of that? They all started doing that. And so they all started learning from each other. It was like their own little, like, before mastermind was a thing.
Team.
But when they got to be teenagers, that a lot of that changed, right? There was some personal things that were going on and whatnot. But I think the open communication, the transparency and vulnerability, like not withholding age appropriate things from your kids, that you're somehow protecting them. Like, like being willing to communicate forgiveness and asking for forgiveness when they heard you arguing with mom, and you try to convince yourself that maybe they didn't hear you, and so you don't need to say anything to them. That's a lie straight out of hell. Like if you can own that as a dad, that have that open communication, transparency, and be like, hey, as the leader of our home, like it doesn't matter what it was about. Like, I could have done that different. I apologize. You had to listen. You had to overhear that in the next room or whatever. And here's how mom and I are working it out, right? Because they heard everything you said. So don't think that they're not. Don't let them hear what you're fighting about and not let them hear how you fix it. That's craziness, So anyway, that communication and openness and just transparency, even related to
that helps.
Yeah, sexual things as they get age appropriate and things like that. Very, very important.
Mm-hmm. Hey, as we wrap up today, in ISI fashion, we always do what's called a full cup. And I'll start. I'm going to share a little something that Robin and I were kind of a no-fail with, and you guys can do the same as we end up. But before I do, I want to say that our goal here today, as you can see, we haven't mastered this. And so don't think that we're masters at this. We lean into the tension, and we want to be better. And we're not going to hit it right every single time. We're not. That's why we have trusted advisors. That's why we're in the mastermind. That's why I need people to help hold me accountable and call me out. And as Anthony encouraged me a while ago, recognize my own shortcomings and then learn to deal with that, right? And so that's what we need. That's the reason we wanted to bring this to all of you today. But some of the things that Robin and I did, I think served us well. First and foremost, we always had dinner together. And there was no, this person's eating in this room, that one's eating that room. I'm not saying those things are wrong. I'm not saying they're bad. I'm saying for our family, we ate together. We ate dinner every night together. The other thing was we didn't allow the children to have TVs in their room. We had one TV. As a family, we would sit and watch TV together in the rooms. And so those are two things that we did. And then finally, we all went to church as a family. It wasn't you go, I'll take you. It's like it was understood. On Sundays, we're going to go to church. We're going to go to small group. We're going to fellowship as a family. We're going to worship as a family. And so once they got older and they started driving, there were some different decisions made sometimes not. But when they were little, they were in the house. They were under our direction. Those are the 3 things that we did. So, Brett, what about you? What are some full cups for you and Crystal that's worked well?
Well, since they were little, we've taken turns. Every night, Sunday night is family prayer night and bedtime together. Outside of that, it's even odd, and the kids know what it is. And like last night, it was my night with Cole. Tonight, it'll be with Addie. And, sometimes that's a 10-minute talk. Sometimes that may be 30 or 45 minutes. Cole's learning a lot of stuff about life as a young man. So there's things that come up last night that we lay in bed and we talk about, and I'm there to be that for him. So That's been huge. I think the kids really, really appreciate that. It ends up when they're we're out of town or they're not with us, whatever that is, we'll end up FaceTiming in the evenings because they're so used to that. The other thing is, I don't know how long we've been doing this, but we do family Friday nights, and there's 4 of us. So each one of us get to pick what we do as a family. Nobody can complain. Nobody can gripe about what food the other one picks or what activity we do. And we go and we have fun together. So they look forward to that. And then obviously, like Aaron said, we go to church together. And then just recently on our Friday nights, we said where I had a night, Crystal had a night, her and I decide together. And then that 4th Friday is date night. So each one of us, we go back and forth each month and take the kids out. And even if because the day is going to get away from you somehow, you can't make it happen every day. So at least we know every night before we go to bed that we prayed with them, we talked with them, and we were there for them. And then Crystal's way better than this at me, but we don't have phones or devices or anything at the table. And we usually eat together every night unless there's something coming up or I have a late meeting like with an organization or something. So, yeah.
That's good.
Yep.
So good. Anthony, full cup.
Yeah, I'll say it for you. I'll say that, yeah, it is wrong for them to eat in the other rooms in different places. They should be eating at the table, and that includes you and your spouse, in my opinion. I mean, that's what the statistics say. Put them at the table. And I don't care if you're religious or not. For the religious side, there's a ton of huge benefits, but just for the relationship and function, there's a ton of benefits as well. So
camaraderie.
It's huge.
Yeah.
Put them at the table.
Good word.
But yeah, the phone thing has been huge for us. We introduced phones about 2 years ago in our family. And that's a whole different topic, maybe for a different day, but don't do it is my suggestion. But being able to, we have rules associated with them, and we have off times with those. When those things go off is when the communications start. I mean, it's insane. It's like night and day, man. It's like turning the light switch on. Some of our best conversations.
Like turning the light switch on.
Yeah. It's some of the best conversations. I want to say sometimes all of the best conversations that we have are mostly like from 8 to 10 o'clock at night when I'm trying to fall asleep, when the 3 or 4 older kids are sitting on our bed just talking. And we've created that space, kind of like you were saying, Wally, like all the girls started coming. When there's a big problem and there's a problem that's not going to embarrass the child, but it's a personal problem, we'll try to talk about it as a family because we know that the next kid's going to deal with it. And so they learn from each other all the time. And that's been huge for us when we started kind of implementing just the ability to have open conversations. And one of the things we've learned, my wife's a therapist too, right? So we read the research and we have the clients, is that they already know. So you might as well have the conversation with them about whatever topic it is. And so we're going to have those topics, and that has been hugely beneficial for our kids because now they're coming at us. Even yesterday, coming home, we were driving home. I had 3 oldest in the car with me. I mean, the whole time we had like a 2.5 hour deep conversation. I said, well, just so you know, we're going to have this conversation again because your mom's going to be mad that she missed out. And that would only happen because we had created the environment where it was openness. And they're like, can we talk about this? I'm like, absolutely, we can talk about it. I don't care what we talk about.
That's good.
That's been huge. That's a full cup for me, for sure.
Wally, end us up, buddy.
Yeah, I mean, I already mentioned the communication, I think, is really key. We all, I think probably each of us could sit here, and I think as parents, we tend to choose something we're going to focus on based on where we maybe felt our parents failed us. And so we all probably have some of those things. That was communication for me, and both Sonia as well. So we both brought that into the relationship. And so that transparency and vulnerability was very, very important to us. I want to use my full cup here just to challenge Brett on something real quick. I heard you say that Addie asked you about daddy-daughter date night, and you said you're trying to get it on the calendar. So I'd like to know when you're going to get it on the calendar.
Did I say that?
Yeah, that's what you said.
Okay, yeah.
Do you have it on the calendar yet?
Well, we do. We go back and forth every other every
All
other
right.
month with each kid. Yeah.
Okay.
On the
all right. You
fourth
got me
Friday.
counted. I thought you said try. I'm trying
Iron
to get
sharpens
it out
iron,
Yeah.
baby. We're getting
All right,
it.
just
Iron
making
sharpens
sure. You
iron. We
got it
don't
there.
let
Way to
anybody
go.
get away.
I'm going to make sure it's on there, though, after we get off the phone so I can text you a picture
That's
of it.
Good. I love it.
That is so good.
Yeah.
Man, all of our heart's desire is to help each person that's listening right now. And Brett and Anthony and Wally have got great hearts. And I'm so grateful that we got together today to talk about the things that didn't work so well for us and some of the things that are working well for us. And I just want to encourage you to even go back maybe and make some notes and say, these guys are doing these things. It's working well for them. Just try them in your family. Just implement a few things. Don't try to go do the whole thing, right? You'll fail miserably. But pick a few things that you think may be applicable to your family so that you can grow and have that successful and significant life that we're all trying to live. So thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm excited for you too, so that you can have that view from the top.
Hey, thanks again, as Big A said, for listening in. We're glad that you were here. An easy way to connect with us is if you go to viewfromthetop.com/group. That's a great place for you to connect with our Christian business owners and entrepreneurs group. Just you've heard today, we carry on conversations just like this in there. It's also a place to network with other guys and really just to expand your knowledge and be able to just encourage and hold each other accountable. So please check that out. That's viewfromthetop.com/group. And I hope to see you there. And we'll also see you next week.